I'm sorry,
I just found this on the floor.
Jeff just put on a hat like right when he pressed start and put it on. And I'm not sure what the hat is.
Not sure. It just was in here on my office floor. I don't know how it got here. I don't know what those crumbs are. Concerning.
Well, dear listeners, I can promise you I don't have a hat on my floor. And with that rousing introduction, we are going to be talking about Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, which was originally published in 1911 under the name Peter and Wendy. So this is the first time I read this book, and I felt like an idea of what the book was going to be like. You know, I've seen the Disney Peter Pan movie, many adaptations of it, Hook, which is not this story, but it's great, you know, and a bunch of different adaptations of Peter Pan. So I felt like I really knew where this story was going. And I was wrong.
Boy, were we wrong.
I was very wrong. This story is very different than how I imagined it.
Honestly, we could just leave it right there. So when the book starts, it was initially, I was starting to get pretty pumped because it starts to talk about Mr. Darling. And it talks about how much he loves money. And if you guys listen to our Mary Poppins episode, it's like the fact that they cut out the bank scene out of the book or they cut it out of the book. It never existed in the book. They added it in the movie. But so it like starts out Mr. Darling's talking about money. And then immediately, and I'm like, oh yeah, I love this guy. And then suddenly immediately pivots to all of his insecurities and about why he is the way he is. Because when he shows up in like the cartoon version, you can tell that he's insecure for sure. But like this guy, super insecure. And I was actually running while I was listening to it. And I got like slower and slower as I was listening to it because like he's like, they're super poor because he doesn't have very much money, works at a bank or something. And then like, you know, Mrs. Darling, his new wife, wants to have kids. And so they have Wendy. And then here's where I got really slow. There's this moment where he and Mrs. Darling are talking and Mr. Darling literally is like, well, let's just get rid of the baby. It's too expensive. And I'm like, what? And she's like, then it's like Mrs. Darling fought for the baby and got to keep it. And I was like, I mean, great. And then she's like, and then they had the next one.
Didn't know that was a question.
Yeah. And then John, and it's like, oh, and that one was a toss up. Were they going to keep it? And then they did. And then Michael, and you know, even harder. And then they're like, and then at the very end of all of that, then they had to have a maid because everybody else had a nanny, you know, or like, you know what I mean? Like they needed to have a nanny because everybody else had a nanny. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is so insecure that like he's willing to give away his kids about, you know, his money thing. And like his insecurities like were the good first part of the book, you know, and like as he gets older and the whole initial, and I'll let you jump in, Kevin, on this, but like the whole initial dressing up scene where he and Mrs. Darling, you know, really where like the movie starts, you know, is like with them getting ready, putting their kids to bed. The Disney movie starts. You know, you can tell that Mr. Darling is pretty messed up in the movie, but like he is really insecure and he just like can't handle it. He can't handle like anything. He just wants to give up. It's like every little thing. It was like, oh no, this guy's manic. Like this guy is not a healthy person to be around. Anyway, that was like my first impression. I'm like, oh man, these kids, they have kind of a maniac as a father.
Yeah, he's intense. Like later in the book, you know, as the kids are gone, oh, the hat's on. Later in the book, when the kids are all missing, so he feels so guilty because Nana the dog wasn't with them
Inside,
and Peter Pan took the kids. So he went and lived in the doghouse for unspecified period of time. It seemed like a very long time.
Which that is also something that I didn't know. Like, when the kids left, it doesn't really, like you said, it doesn't really say, but like they're not just gone for like a night. They're gone for much longer.
it implies that they're gone for months, not
Right.
years, so that they're like all hope is gone. It's just at that time. I don't know how long that time frame is, but where they're like they still can come back, but they're losing hope. Whatever time frame that is, whatever physical and emotional timeline that is. Yeah, I didn't get that because in pretty much all the movies they get back and it was like, oh man, that was a rough 48 hours. And it's like,
Yeah, I
no,
mean,
this
but in the
was
but in the movie though, they just come back, and it's like that night though, isn't it?
it's something like that. Nobody seems that shocked when they're back.
Yeah,
No, I think it is that night. I haven't seen the movie in some time
I
because I
think it is
think
because
they
Mrs.
come in
Darling
and they're
goes in
looking
and
at
just
him.
like gives him a kiss and stuff. But yeah, so like the dad gets manic. He throws Nana, who's the dog who nannies the kids, throws her into the dog bin, and then they go to a big party. And then of course that's when Peter comes in. Classic, has lost his shadow, but like the first thing really though that happens is that Peter and Wendy are like now like she's like trying to kiss him, all of a sudden it's just like right off the bat. And then there's some confusion. He thinks that a thimble is a kiss and that a thimble that
A kiss is a thimble.
a kiss is a thimble and a thimble is a kiss. And anyway, it's just like, and then I'm like, oh man, not like this 14-year-old. I mean, it was just kind of like, it just, I don't know, it was just all kind of off-putting. And then,
So here's where it went pear-shaped for me. Is as they're about to leave, they started to fly. Up until this point, it's just kind of like, yeah, I know this one, keep going. But this is where it got weird for me. Where Peter Pan, I don't remember exactly how he knows, but he knows that the Darlings are coming back. Or that
that's right.
and he's like, we got to get out of here. He doesn't say that. But in his mind, he's like, we have to go. So he rushes them out so that their family won't find him. And I was like, wait a second. That seems bad.
Yeah, he's
that doesn't
manipulative as
seem
crap.
like a good guy thing. That doesn't seem like a protagonist type action. For me, when I first thought that this thing was going squirrely, that was the moment where it was like, this is weird.
But yeah, and so, like they like go and, Peter, yeah, because like pretty much he knows that Wendy's super good at telling stories. So he's like, let's go to Neverland. They go to Neverland. And
which takes them like a couple days, by the way. The second star to the right is very far.
Right.
They do not capture that in the Disney movie.
And then when they get there, it's like pandemonium because the pirates start shooting at them right out the bat. And then Toodles shoots and almost kills Wendy. It's like very violent all at like that moment and very jarring. And then, the kind of crazy thing is like Wendy truly like becomes a mother to them. And the thing that was so sad was how quickly Michael, the youngest, starts to forget that he ever even had a mom. It's like within a second, it's just like they're already, yeah. And also it's kind of sad because like the Lost Boys, like how they became Lost Boys is they were little babies that fell out of their prams and then they just wound up in Neverland. So they're just like little kids that totally were forgotten, so uber sad. But Kevin, can we just talk about, I know what both of our favorite parts are just for a second. I know what it's going to be. Let's do it. Do you want to do it?
The twins.
The hook. Tell them about the hook. It is the best.
Okay, so that is a better part. So the thing about Captain Hook is that he loves his hook, is that he thinks that his hook is awesome. And there's a point where he's like, if I have children, may they be born with a hook. May they not suffer with the curse, looks at his hand, a curse of one of these. May they be born with a hook. It's like, that dude loves his hook.
But yeah, so like all these things, but then they get in the battle with the pirates. Peter gets wounded by the hook. He thinks he's gonna die. Like we haven't even talked about Tinkerbell, who's like very violent and aggressive.
I think you can pretty much say that literally everybody is significantly more violent than you expect. Even when when you see like Hook, wherever there is quite a bit of combat and people die, and you have the amazing moment where like he's stealing second base and somebody pulls out a gun and shoots the guy. Amazing. That's just high quality cinema. Not relevant to our current conversation. But even when you watch something like that, this was way more violent. Like everybody, it's not just, and it's not like boasting like a little kid, like, oh, I could kill 1,000 pirates. It's like bloodthirsty mania. It's like, this is not great.
Totally not great. And one of the most uncomfortable places, as I was just looking at my notes, one of the most uncomfortable things that happens too is just like it's cringy, is like Wendy goes to Peter and she's like, I love you. And then he's like, I love you like my mom. It's like, or I think I love you like I'm your son or something like that. And it's like, ugh, that's awkward.
So,
And, go for it.
so this is a good time. Let's talk about Peter. Let's talk about frickin' Peter Pan. So,
It's tough.
when, I mentioned the part about the twins. So Peter Pan is not that benevolent of a leader. So he's outlawed that anybody can know anything that he doesn't know. So all the Lost Boys. So two of the Lost Boys are twins, and they don't know that, or they're not allowed to talk about it, and they don't have names because Peter doesn't know what a twin is. So he just pretty much ignores them. And it's like, well, they can't really exist, so they don't even have names. They're just the twins, but Peter doesn't know what the twins are, so they can't say the twins. And it's just like, that's kind of messed up. It's not great. And
And also Peter kills a bunch of pirates.
yeah,
Like he's like pretty bloodthirsty and like very open about, wanting to do that. And then like, Tink kind of like poisons him and stuff. And I think that like the biggest shock for me was that, and total spoiler alert, but like Peter kills Hook. He kicks him off the boat and kills him. And he just, and he like even does it in a way that like Hook, it was like kind of like fair, like foul play or something, bad form. It's like bad to do. And then, then like Peter takes control of the ship and everything. Oh, and I remember too, like in that final battle, so Wendy gets captured. I think we're probably assuming that you know this story a little too much for all of you listening, but like Wendy gets captured and, they go to save her, and, Peter's killing a bunch of pirates, kills Captain Hook. And in that though, I still remember there was this like moment where the pirates are losing and Smee is like, can you take me, Wendy? Can I become one of your kids or something like that? He says something like that, and then she's like, I feel bad for you, Smee, but not get out of here. And I was like, oh, good for her. Smee, stop being weird. It's just crazy. Yeah, and then, Peter, like, as they're going home, Peter flies ahead, tries to convince him. It's like, don't take the Lost Boys, don't take everything, don't go home, because, like Wendy starts to remember her family. She goes, and like, as you mentioned in the beginning, the dad's like chilling out in the doghouse,
literally and figuratively.
And I still remember, like, Mrs. Darling comes to the door, and even though they're in their beds, her 3 kids are now in their beds. She just like looks and she thinks that she's just seeing them, and then she realizes that everything's great. But like, to me, like, the end is so classic Peter Pan. Is there anything you want to say about it before I get into it?
Yeah. So right, one of the major themes, right, of this book is growing up, right? Anyone who's even passingly familiar with this story knows that this story is about growing up. Because the thing about Neverland is that if you're one of the kids, you never grow up. Peter Pan is the boy who never grows up. In fact, the book, interesting fact, this was actually a play before it was a book. Fun fact. One of the names of the plays was The Boy Who Never Grows Up, Peter Pan. And it's this whole internal battle of Wendy, primarily, of trying to go through, do I stay a child? Do I stay in this Neverland? Or do I decide to grow up? And eventually, at the end of the story, she decides to grow up, and I want to go back. And then she gets captured by pirates and blah, 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 blah. But one of the main themes, but, with this whole idea of Peter is supposed to epitomize childhood. in a lot of ways. He is, he is carefree, he is fun loving, he's all about freedom, but he is also extremely forgetful. And that is a constant theme. His forgetfulness. He is, in many ways, he's actually very cruel. He's extremely selfish. And there's this constant theme throughout the book of this, I guess, the duality of childhood, the innocence and this darkness. And I'm not saying I necessarily believe that, but that's, one of the themes of the book is this, as Wendy experiences childhood next to Peter, who is supposed to epitomize it, both the good and the bad, she decides that it's time for her to step from childhood into adulthood. And just to the points that you're getting to is that Peter doesn't change and Wendy does. And about that kind of coming of age thing of, I could stay, but now it is time for me to grow up.
And what's kind of cool about the book that you don't get in the movie is that the Lost Boys go with them, and like they all go on to lead lives, and all of them slowly start to forget about Neverland. In fact, there's a part in the book where Mrs. Darling even kind of like thinks, oh, I think I heard that name before, like Peter Pan. It's like that it almost stirred something in her memory. But yeah, and like I think it was Toodles goes on to have like a successful business career. One thing about the play that's kind of cool is that in the play, Wendy marries one of the Lost Boys. It doesn't say who, but she marries one of them, which is kind of cool in the play. It's not in the book. But then at the very end, right, Peter comes to visit Wendy, but now she's grown because he used to come every summer or something, like every spring. But then when she kept getting older, he stopped coming, whatever. Anyway, so
he didn't stop coming because he didn't want her to come. He kept forgetting. That's right. That was because
now he keeps forgetting about the Lost Boys. He's forgetting about Wendy. That's right. And anyway, so one time he shows up and he's like, Wendy, what's up? And she's like, I'm old now, Peter. And like when I picture this scene, I picture her being like 90, although she's probably only like 30, like younger than me. But like the lights off and she's like sitting in a chair, and he's like, no, don't come out. I don't want to see you. And she's like, I'm old, Peter. I don't know. It's like, and he's like, no, and just like flies away. Yeah. I'm like, I'm decrepit. But it's just kind of like this interesting thing. And then he just like kind of leaves, and for me, like the thing that I resonated with about what you were talking about, like the eternal childhood, is like too much of a good thing can be very bad. And like, we are meant to grow up. And I think that like, we don't want to lose childlike curiosity, childlike wonder, but that's why it's childlike, but at some point we do need to grow up. We do need to take these responsibilities, because if we do and we prolong the childhood, right, this is essentially what happens. Peter is this epitome of too much. And like, and I'm, and I'm reading it with a lot more harshness. I'm sure, that there's a lot of really great things about, the book, that when people really, when they grew up and they really liked it, obviously it's become a classic. And again, I kind of think it's the same thing with like Alice. I think it's just was so out there for the time. Like we live in a world of like Hunger Games and Ender's Game and a million lit RPGs. Like there's just so many fantasy genre, science fiction that like challenges things that we've like kind of become desensitized to it. But when they're thinking about like, oh, flying kid in this place called Neverland, like, wow, that's so whimsical and amazing and fun. And maybe we look back on it and I just kind of look at like, well, Peter's a brat and very manipulative. Tinkerbell I struggle with. Captain Hook is awesome, which I don't know, maybe I just like identify way too much with all the adult characters in every kid's book now. Like what's the dad's name in Mary Poppins? What's that guy?
I was about to say Mr. Darcy. It's not Mr. Darcy.
No. What's that guy's name? Can't believe I forgot. That guy. He is awesome. He is awesome. And Captain Hook is awesome. Mainly because he took a deformity, right? And he made it a strength. And I love that. He thought that it was so awesome. He would like look at his other hand with disdain, And anyways, like overall, it was fun. It's short. The audiobook reader's great. There's some cringy pieces in the book. But overall, like we wanted to listen to it because we were actually going to Disneyland. And then I didn't even wind up writing Peter Pan. It was so busy. So I
It
didn't
is
write it.
disproportionately busy.
It was crazy.
That doesn't make sense.
It was crazy. Like we even showed up on the early day and it was already 40 minutes. I'm like,
Here, I got two final takes for you. I got one positive one and one negative one. And they're related. So, the first one is going back to the same story about Wendy, right? When she's older, you know, you look at that moment and where Peter is so afraid. And part of that, I believe, is that he has recognized that his opportunity for a closer relationship with Wendy, with a different relationship with Wendy, has passed. That because he is so stuck in this moment, in being a child, that he no longer has the opportunity to create those longer lasting relationships, which many times start in childhood, but do fortify themselves in adulthood. And that he lost that ability and that everyone else has passed him by. And that is part of the reason why he forgets. Not only is that part of childhood being able to deal with harsh things and just to be able to forget, but because that is how he survives. Like later when Wendy's talking to him, like he no longer remembers Captain Hook or Tinkerbell who die. And these people who were such pivotal parts in his life, he just doesn't even care. They're just gone. And just that as part of growing up, though, you know, you lose some things, but you also have the ability to deepen those relationships. And that's something that I've definitely seen in my life, where you can take a childhood relationship and take it to the next level as you're an adult, you know, with friends and family. And I think that was, you know, a sad thing for Peter, but a really cool point. I'll end on a happier note, on a happier thing that I thought was fun. Is after Peter leaves, he eventually comes back and takes Wendy's daughter, and then later his granddaughter, you know, for these week-long excursions, these spring cleanings, and that just the idea, you know, we can all have that chance to be children, and that there will come a time where we need to grow up, but that things might be a little better. We might have a little bit more perspective. We might have a little bit more joy and a little bit more appreciation for those around us in our lives if we spend a little bit of time in Neverland.
I love it so much. And I know that's the most perfect place to end ever. I do just have one more thing to say, and I'm so sorry. It's just because I just thought of it. I know it's the worst. But one thing, because I also thought that it was beautiful and because I feel like I ragged on the book too much, is that one not so good thing of the introduction. I don't know if you remember, but I can't remember if he like coughs or if he sneezes, but if he does a certain thing, then like an adult dies or something. But on the other hand, if you clap, it can make fairies be born or something. Or no, like I think every baby that's born, laughs. When they laugh, a fairy is born. But one of the things I love is like Peter Pan, you know, he is constantly like when Tink is dying. I do love the thing about Peter Pan where he will go and he kind of wants us all to clap and wants everybody to clap to believe in fairies. So to kind of go along with what you were saying is that every once in a while it's not bad to kind of break that and to find those childlike qualities, to go to that, you know, Neverland quote unquote place in our hearts. So, hey, thanks so much for going on this journey with us. You know, go ahead and, you know, listen to the book. I mean, I think that you guys kind of know where we stood on it. Not something that I think I'm going to listen again super soon, but I think that it is important to kind of distinguish, you know, to get a sense for what these real stories are behind a lot of these much more classic stories that maybe all of us grew up with. So thank you so much for coming in, and we'll see you next time.